you've been at Oxford for a while, you feel like you have the essay writing basics down, but you want to push yourself to do better. Or you might hear your tutor keep telling you to bring out your own voice, and you want to know how to do that. So here are my top tips for writing more in-depth analytical essays. Tip 1, question the question. Is the question slightly misplaced? Is there a hidden implication in the wording that you can elucidate? This works especially well with or type questions. For example, on the British Politics and Government syllabus, there's a question that asks if female suffrage was a success of militancy or moderation. Well, the militant wing of the suffrage movement wouldn't have developed without the moderate wing. So maybe this question has a false dichotomy that you can tear down in your essay. Use this tip carefully, though. You still have to make sure that you answer the question, and you also don't want to fence it. Tip number 2, play on keywords in the question. Okay, so you can't find a way to tell your tutor you thought the wording was off. Try to look at the question for any descriptors that you might be able to play on. For example, another question on the British Politics and Government syllabus asks if New Labour updated or abandoned traditional Labour policy. What would it mean to update policy? What would it mean to abandon it? How can you use those definitions to structure your essay? On the Theory of Politics syllabus, for example, we ask, is freedom best understood as the absence of any constraints? Well, maybe that's one way to understand freedom, but it's not the best way. What is the word best telling you in this essay, and how can you use that to add more analytical depth to your essay? This leads me to tip number 3, rank your arguments. If you're trying to determine what makes a country democratic, there might be 3 elements that you've identified, but one might be necessary to make the others work. For example, you might need free speech before you can have fair elections. If so, say that. Ranking or systematizing your arguments in this way shows your tutor you understand how they're connected. Tip 4, thematize your essay. Can you draw out a common underlying point? Can you show that all the points you're making have some theme in common, or can you add an extra layer of analysis to the essay? Tacking this on in the middle or the end won't really cut it. If you're going to add something slightly extraneous to the argument, it needs to be unified throughout the essay, and it actually has to make the argument better. Otherwise, it will look like you're just adding things on for the sake of it. That said, maybe all the causes of populism that you've identified have an economic element to it. If so, draw that theme out. Maybe Mill's utilitarianism informs his theory of liberty. You can use that as a unifying theme throughout your arguments to give your essay an extra something. Finally, tip number 5, talk about your methodology. If you take time to carefully read an academic article, you'll notice that the authors will tell you how they approach the question. The best bit about this tip is that you're already using a methodology, whether you realize it or not. So you just need to work on integrating it explicitly into your arguments. How will you go about exploring this topic? Maybe you want to look at 3 case studies. Maybe you want to compare and contrast the outcomes of 3 types of regimes. Maybe you want to look at Locke's theory of legitimacy through a lens of natural rights. Again, you want to be careful with this because you don't want to overcomplicate your essay. But if you can get this right, you'll add another layer that shows you're really thinking about how you've approached the question, and it will give your essay more analytical depth.